those who are just joining now, we're going to go over what the essentials is and all that good stuff all over again. So in case you were at the first workshop, feel free to like go get some water, stretch, whatever you may need to do. And we'll be starting class 2 in just like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. You can see my screen, right, Polly? It's on the essentials graphic. Okay, cool. So yeah, hello. Here we go. Day 2, class 2 of today, of yesterday, 2, 4.
Class
For
we do
the
math.
essentials. For the essentials. Yeah, the essentials, in case y'all don't know, our free online webinar series about navigating the photojournalism community. Hello, hi. I'm Danielle Villasana, a community team member of the Everyday Projects and also photojournalist, wear a couple of different hats. And the Everyday Projects is, if you don't know, now you know, it's a global community of visual storytellers, all committed to using imagery to combat harmful misperceptions and to rise above persistent inequality, which has been the thread of all of these amazing classes by these amazing presenters and photographers, visual storytellers. And as a nonprofit, we work to provide opportunities for our global community and to provide structure, support, and direction for the diverse and worldwide range of everyday photography groups. And I am here today with the one and only amazing Polly Irungu of Black Women Photographers. Yeah, she founded it. No big deal. It's all good.
You are far too kind. Hi everyone, I'm Polly, and I'm so excited to be doing this again with you all, especially with Danielle. It's such a great time that we have each season, and especially just because we're breaking down some really hard issues and things, and it's really just simplifying it with these speakers that we have. And again, this would not be possible without our partner, the Photo Wings, for making these classes free and accessible. And again, they're being recorded, and afterwards we'll also get them transcribed in Spanish and French.
Yes, multiple languages, so cool. So here we are. Yes, the essentials. Just really quickly want to give a shout out, high five, hug, virtual beer, glass of wine to those of us on the Everyday Projects team who are helping to make all of this flow smoothly. And that is Rebecca Gibeon and Fiona Washira, as well as Austin Merrill, who along with Peter DeCampo are the co-founders of the Everyday Projects. So thank you all so much for also helping us behind the scenes. Paula's gonna take this part.
Yes, we're continuing this weekend today with some amazing teachers. We just heard from Juan Maria, and next up will be Zakiyyah. Each session will include some time for Q&A at the end, so please drop your questions in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat, for that way we can keep track. But please do not be shy. This is a safe space to ask any questions you might have and get answered by some of the most experienced storytellers in the industry. No matter what stage of practice you are at, though, we are confident you're going to learn a ton from them.
Yes, like totally learning so much. It's like secretly kind of why I love to co-host these. I'm like, ooh, I'll make sure I listen to all of the classes. As we've mentioned a bajillion times, but just in case you didn't hear it the first time or the 10th or the 12th, these classes are going to be recorded. And you just said that, Polly, in multiple languages. You said that already. You covered that. These are our social media handles and websites and everything. So bookmark them. Tattoo them on your body. Do not let them go. Screenshot. Okay, here we go.
Yes, so the next class I'm really excited about, Zakiyyah, I hope I do your intro, the justice it deserves. Zakiyyah is a freelance photojournalist and street photographer based in her hometown of Brooklyn, New York, and her work focuses on the accurate representations of communities that have historically been at the center of parachute photojournalism. She graduated from Benedict College and HBCU with a BA in mass communications and will receive her master's degree in engagement journalism from the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism this December. She was the first summer 2023 visual editor intern at WNYC's The Gothamist and her work has also been published in the New York Times, Reuters, and Business Insider, among others. Zakiyyah is a member of Black Women Photographers, Diversity by Photo, The Loop, and the National Association of Black Journalists. While achieving all of this, Zakiyyah has been a loving mother to her son, Jordan. So tell us, Zakiyyah, what is the secret for how you do it all as a mother?
Hi. Hold on. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for that intro. I'm pretty sure, like most of the speakers today and yesterday, we are good and nervous. So we're gonna get through this. um, how do I do it all? It gets done. But I have a few points that I feel is pretty important, and we'll give a good summary of what life has been like for me within the past 16 years. That's one thing about myself that a lot of people seem to be thrown off by, aside from my girlish looks. I have a 16-year-old son, so that's always a fun topic of conversation. But my presentation, you will hear how life has did its thing and allowed me to be, where I'm at now, a part of life where you don't expect will benefit you in some ways. But, here we are, like I said. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Amazing, amazing. We'll just let you take it away.
All right, hold on. Let me set my timer so I can be mindful of the time here. And I do also want to point out that with parenting, it's sometimes it can be pretty subjective, right? So what works for me might not work for some others. So, what I have here to share, it's more like little tips, not necessarily advice or lessons like some of the other presenters, because this is about life. And you can't put an instruction manual on life. I mean, there are some do's and some don'ts, but for the most part, there's no perfect step one, step two, step three, like we are used to in, say, photography and such. So let me pull up my slideshow. Hold on, let me share my screen first. Um, let's see. Okay, can you see my desktop?
Yes.
All right, so let's move this over here. All right, can you see the full screen?
Yes.
Making sure everything is still good. Okay, perfect. So, juggling photography and parenting. Um, it's like two chaotic worlds, right? Photography is it's been my passion since I can remember. And parenthood is something, it's a part of my life that has taught me probably the most that I think I would have ever learned about people or places or myself, had I not become a parent. So, speaking of parents, I do want to start by giving thanks to my ancestors, the women whose bodies I came through, specifically my grandmothers. Hold on, I don't know if this is blocking. Let's see. Um, and also my mother. I don't know what dreams that they had for themselves individually, because I never had the chance to ask them. But I do acknowledge that every decision and sacrifice that they have made as parents and as women have allowed me to be here today. And I also acknowledge and uplift their spirit in their presence, because they continue to strengthen me every day. So let's get into some fun facts. We all love fun facts. So, as a little girl, I always wanted to be a ballerina. or a figure skater, but I was raised by my Gullah Geechee Nana, who was not trying to hear any of that. My nana told us our life path was to go to school, graduate, and then get a good job with benefits, preferably working for the city. Those jobs offered security and stability and a pension. In short, my nana was not about to spend money on a dream that was more entertainment than practical. Photography for me during this time was ever present in my life, but only as something we did to remember family and church events and milestones. And our household was almost always, it almost always had a Polaroid camera or some other point and shoot with film in it. And so everywhere you looked, there was a photo mounted or propped up somewhere throughout the house. And one of the end tables in our living room was stuffed with decades worth of family photos. And I absolutely loved it. I loved looking through the photos. I loved discovering or seeing faces of people that was related to me, but I didn't know them. And just the whole process of taking pictures was really fun to me as well. So I loved it so much that I began using some of my own allowance money and purchased my own disposable cameras and my own point and shoot so I can make memories with my friends in school and my family members and whatever else that I found to be appealing. Back then, I didn't know what street photography was, but looking back at some of my prints, I do realize that I was always a street photographer. And this picture here is of me in high school with my point and shoot that I kept in my book bag every single day, well, almost every day. So as Polly mentioned in my intro, I went to Benedict College and majored in mass communications with a concentration in print journalism. I joined our school's newspaper, the NABJ, a member of a sorority, and a few other on campus groups, and was pretty sure that upon graduation, I'd be working for someone's newspaper or magazine, either as a features writer, as you can see by some of my earlier bylines. Some of the issues were pretty controversial at the time. Again, this is the early 2000s. um, but instead of applying for internships during my senior year of college, I was preparing myself for a different path. I gave birth to my son Jordan a day after I turned 23 in my senior year. And 2 weeks later, I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts degree. Single motherhood and freelance photojournalism did not go well together in the early 2000s. And so I found myself at jobs that were everything but journalism. They offered benefits and stability and the promise of a pension, like my Nana always suggested. But I also managed to continue photographing events for friends and family on the side. My daily thoughts, though, were split in half. One side dreaming of the day I would be able to get back into journalism, and the other trying to make sense of my son's Asperger's diagnosis later on. But as my son and my college bylines aged, and the more motherhood demanded from me, it became increasingly difficult for me to jump back into my desired career track. And then the pandemic happened. I was laid off from my temp job that I had at the time. My son was doing school remotely, and I grew restless at home very quickly. And then the protests, sparked by the death of George Floyd, flooded the streets of New York City. And then I decided I couldn't stay inside any longer. I went to a few rallies, sometimes with my son, my sister, and my nephew, and sometimes by myself. But at that time, each time the only camera that I had with me was the one on my phone, but I did manage to capture a little bit of history with it. I'll never forget coming home one evening from a rally, charged and inspired, and telling my father, from this point on, I refuse to apply for any job that is not photojournalism. And so far, I have stuck with doing just that. Of course, with purchasing a an actual camera, not just my phone. And so, you know, that leap was very scary. But I realized very quickly that everything that I've learned along my parenthood journey would be applied to my reentry into journalism. So here's a few insights and understandings that have allowed me to do pretty okay while juggling parenthood and photojournalism. And this is my son, Jordan. It truly takes a village to raise a child. We hear that saying all the time. It sounds so cliche sometimes because we hear it so much, but it like it really is one of the most essential things in a parent's bag of tricks, if you want to call it that. Whether you're working, regardless of the industry that you're working in, but specifically as a freelance photojournalist, for myself, you cannot be successful without having a team of people to be able to rely on and call at the last minute to help you out with your kids. There were plenty of days when I knew covering an event would have me arrive home past dinner time, or my son and or his school would call while I was in the middle of an assignment because something was wrong. But being able to contact a friend or a family member to be able to, you know, go to the school or pick him up or whatever the case is, make sure that he was good, allowed me to work somewhat in peace. Um, Not everyone has a large support system, but it is very important to have a list of people you know you can count on in the event of an emergency. I can't remember the reasons why, but on two rare occasions, I was able to bring my son with me on an assignment. This is not something that I recommend anyone to do, especially if you have smaller children, because you can easily become distracted from the job, or your child can become a liability. So, but for my situation, the person that hired me to photograph the event was a friend, and Jordan was old enough to help out. And so we put him to work. This is the event there. And that little arrow is pointing to Jordan in the back on bag duty. um, Typical teen, he might grumble and gripe about it, but I do feel like exposing him to community service type of events specifically, especially whether I'm photographing them or not, I feel like it's very important in making sure that your child is pretty well rounded. So again, balancing little life lessons for him and, and also doing my job in this particular moment worked well for me. But again, each situation is different. Um, Also, too, laws that dictate what age and the length of time a child is able to be home by themselves vary from state to state. And so I always encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with those laws before you take on an assignment without having a caregiver in place. Again, this more so applies to older kids. Long gone are the days when a babysitter or the babysitter that our parents had for us, put that in air quotes, was just them saying that we had to like not open the door for anyone and not answer the phone if somebody came by. Anybody over 35 should be able to know what I mean when I say that. Um, Last minute assignments. They're not a jump scare. They can be, but they don't have to be. Some people are okay with them, last minute assignments. And but for parents, it can be really, really stressful, stress inducing. Getting a call or an email from an editor with less than a 24-hour notice, again, can be stressful for anyone. But it's important when you do get when your editor does reach out to you, that you do ask all of the necessary questions to be able to get as much detail as possible about the assignment, such as the start time, the anticipated duration of the assignment, and the deadline to file the images. This will help to determine if you will be able to drop your kid off to school, or pick them up from daycare or wherever else they may have already planned to be throughout that day. Or if you need to make arrangements with members of your support team to do these things for you. I like to compare last minute assignment requests to like the day you forget your child is off from school due to like staff development, or it's some new holiday or so that you didn't know about because the memo got lost in your stack of papers or pushed down in your email inbox. It takes a lot of last minute adjusting and phone calls and text messages and feeling like you're bothering people. But again, you're only as successful as your strongest support link. So don't be afraid to have those people on standby, and just know that everyone that says yes to you in those moments is helping you get a little bit more further in your career than you thought you might have been able to because of being a parent. um for me, well, for most people, turning down an assignment hurts. And my reasons why I turn down assignments, especially if it's pertaining my child, is usually not a part of the conversation I have with editors. I don't feel that it's necessary. Just like with regular jobs or regular jobs, you put that in air quotes. Some jobs, standard jobs, like my past jobs working in medical offices, they sometimes ask you, for a brief reason. But by law and per your union, if you're in a union, which I was, you really don't have to give a reason. If you're cool with your supervisor, then, if you let them know that it's something pertaining to your kid, they might be a little bit more understanding and sympathetic. But again, freelancing, photography, photojournalism, the rules are slightly different. These are stories that needs to be done, turned around, especially if it's a breaking news story. And, not to sound mean, but, sometimes it's sad, say if your child is sick or whatever, but, editors aren't really in this business to hear those excuses. It's like, well, if you could do it, then okay, great. If you can't do it, okay, that's fine too. We'll, find someone else to do it. Don't take it personal. If you can't take the job and you feel bad, and just have some kind of confidence, or not kind of, but have some confidence that you continue to build good working relationships with your editors, and hopefully the next assignment will come your way pretty soon. I do also want to point out that historically in this industry, as parents, we women specifically have been in the shadows, right? A lot of photojournalists and working photographers for a very long time have been men, and a lot of their wives or girlfriends or whomever was taking care of their kids, they were the ones at home while the guys were out in the field covering the stories, bringing us the visual news. And oftentimes, if you tell an employer really anywhere that you're a parent, then they often put you last to to be hired, because they assume that you're unreliable. So again, I feel like things have definitely changed a lot. A lot more people, again, it depends on your part of the industry. A lot more people are more open and flexible to you. Say if you have your baby in a carrier, some of them might think it's fine, but it's situational. Again, it's not something that I suggest you do, so don't tell them that I told you to do that. But open communication is very important. Again, it could be a burden, but it doesn't have to be. And to the point about open communication, closed mouths don't get fed. Kids grow really, really fast and frequently. They are always in need of new clothes and shoes and this and that. And if you want to raise a well rounded child, you'll need to spend a lot of money on extracurricular activities and other interests. So, and also like hobbies that they pick up from classmates usually has like a high price on it. Everything costs a lot of money nowadays. So, and also too, don't forget about yourself. Photo gear is not cheap. Neither is the cost of living in most places, especially here in New York City. And since we can't eat our gear or our exposure, pun intended, paid assignments it's crucial for parents. Um, but also don't be afraid to ask for more. Um, I know a lot of times when you're working in the news industry, most newsrooms have their set rates, their set day rates. And I know that other sides of photography, say if you're doing commercial work or editorial or what have you, and the clients are reaching out to you, then you can set your own rates. Um, so don't be afraid to speak up and to let people know that you would like more. You however you want to word it, you can especially for clients that are coming to you and asking you for your rates. I have a cousin who owns a business, and a while ago she once told me that if someone asks you what are your rates and you give them a number and they automatically say yes, then that means you set the number too low. So that they probably have a much larger budget than they are in letting you in on. So, what they say, shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon and you'll end on the star at least, or however that saying goes. So, for me, uh, again, I work in photojournalism, and so most of my rates are told to me from the editors that, whoever I'm working with. So it's a little tricky to try to negotiate, but again, it doesn't hurt to ask. Have I tried it and been successful? I can't say that I have, but it's okay. um, I know also too that like for hold on one second. So I know also too for me, discussing budgets is a little bit uncomfortable as well, and rates. But I feel like my journey with parenting, it has allowed me to speak up and advocate for myself. It's something that you kind of have to do because you're in this constant state of survival mode, right? You have to survive for yourself, you have to survive for your kid. And so shyness goes out the window very fast when you pull in these life lessons. Um, so, yeah, again, don't be afraid to speak up and say what you want and mean it. Again, speaking to communications, communicating boundaries clearly with your kids when you are working is very important. I cannot stress that enough. Kids, if for some reason, it doesn't matter. Like your kids can be off doing whatever throughout the day. The world can be perfectly fine and they can be chilling and comfortable. And all of a sudden, once you sit down to do your work, post production, edits, or whatever, now all of a sudden, the whole house is going to fall in, right? So, um, it's definitely important to set boundaries early on with your kids. And, these are things that they can carry into life as they get older, right? So I know I used to have an agreement with my son a while ago that when he saw my hard drive or my SD card reader plugged into my laptop, that meant that I was in the process of doing work and that I couldn't be bothered. So I told him the only time he can interrupt me was if there was an emergency, as I mentioned. And in the beginning, he honored that. And then after a while, that luxury wore off, and something as small as the pencil needing to be sharpened became the emergencies. Like any work from home setup, you have to do your best with the space that you have. Other times, you might be forced to hide in the bathroom with your laptop or your other hardware and a bottle of water to be able to complete your assignments, and that's okay. Kids will disturb you. It's, what they do. They are their own people and they're figuring out, the ways of the world and the courtesies and, the standards, if you will. So don't stress the small things, right? Sometimes things don't always work out as planned. When we think we have had our structure put in place to, get our job done and, got everything secure, and stuff just don't happen like that. Again, kids are always in need of something, and it's fine. And another point that I want to make is prioritizing your mental health. Parenting is stressful. If anyone tells you otherwise, please let me know who it was so I can find out what they're doing so that way they are not stressed out about it. But regardless of, what you do, how you navigate, we're always in this position of wondering and being concerned if we're doing it right, and our kids have all of our attention and our time, and we're doing our best to make sure that they don't talk about us as much in therapy when they get older. So it's very important that in the work that we're doing as photographers, if you're covering breaking news or stories that are pretty, heavy on the spirit, that you take some time for yourself to be able to decompress and, before jumping back into parenting, even if it means when you return from an assignment, taking a quick stroll around the block to, reset your mind, or on your days that you don't have anything scheduled, like you're with yourself or with your child, that you prioritize something that's going to make the both of you feel good. It's the way that I see the world now, though, as a parent, it's completely different than obviously before I had my son. I think so that speaks to both my age and, again, lived experiences. As I mentioned in the beginning, I had my son when I was 23. 16 years later, I don't see the world the same way that I do as a mom and as a person. But also too, some of my photo assignments that I've had has also helped shape the way that I see the world. So understanding that people's hustle is different, um, whether you're a parent or not, people are hurting, people are joyful, people have goals, people have dreams. And, a lot of times when you are forced to examine this space, this world that we have brought another body, another person, another soul into, you start to be mindful of the choices that you make, and or at least you should. At least I do, put it that way. And these are things that I also share with my son. Like, say, Matt Sims here, for example, is a gentleman that I met when I was a part of the Missouri Photo Workshop. He owns multiple properties, and his love for his family, keeps him going and keeps him thriving and allows him to maintain his property and, to do the manual work that it takes to make sure that him and his people are good. Similar with photography, we do what we need to do to be successful and to make sure that all of our people are good, especially our kids. Being able to see the world through my lens has allowed me to inform my son of, a lot of times parents will say, you can see the world, you can see the world. But I think it's very important also for me with juggling photojournalism and parenting. I'm able to tell my son that you can do these things while doing what you love, right? Oftentimes, a lot of people get stuck in the rut of their everyday, day-to-day job, and they're unhappy, but they can travel, and that's fine. But at the same time, they're still not smiling internally or externally. And so I just make sure that the little bits that I pull away from with each assignment, or even when I'm walking around the streets of New York, I'm seeing these little hidden messages like on this guy's jacket, reminding me to, keep going. Um, Photography is not something that anybody, any adult in my life told me that I was able to do when I was a kid growing up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And so, as I mentioned, it's very important to me to share with my son that he can do whatever. I always say you can do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else. And so, again, just being a living example to him at 16 years old, we feel like they're not listening. And then maybe one day it'll click, and, sometimes he'll, say, I remember when you told me XYZ, or, whatever other little nugget that I gave him. And yeah, it's a wild ride. I wouldn't trade it for the world, honestly. I've always found it funny when people say that, I don't know what I would be or who I would be without, my child. And again, I used to think it was so corny. It was so corny to me. But I know now, without a shadow of a doubt, every single thing that I've done and every point that I've gotten to in my life, my journey, and all of my lessons, and wanting to continue to learn about life and about people and become a better journalist, I'm able to do so, because of the hand that I was dealt, really. So I think that is about it for my presentation. And I would like to thank everybody for listening to me ramble on. And I will stop sharing. Here's also where you can find me. I'll leave this up here for a split second in case anybody wants to jot it down, but I know that it's available through Black Women Photographers and the Everyday Project as well. So,
Polly and I are speechless. We have nothing to say. It was beautiful. Wow, Zakiyyah, that was so lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
And I loved the archival images that you shared. Oh my gosh, like warm and fuzzy feelings, so sweet. And just hearing more about your path. And I love what you just said there at the end, that, wanting to learn about life and become a better journalist, you were able to do so because of the hand that you were dealt. And I think sometimes, that's really helpful for people to hear, because like you said in the beginning, subjectivity, right? Like there is no path in this industry that is the same. Everyone's path is different. There's no like direct way to get anywhere. So thank you again for highlighting that in your presentation. Okay, we've got some questions for you. So like I said, you've gone through so much and you've overcome so much, and you're resolved to not apply to any non-journalism jobs. Like you said, it was a really big step and was scary. And there are a lot of people, right, who, we meet people all the time that are like, oh, I was a lawyer for 20 years, or I'm a nurse in addition to photography, as a photojournalist. So it takes a big step. It takes a big leap, like you said. So how were you able to do that more of in like a spiritual, emotional way? I mean, in this industry, we have to have such a strong core and heart. Like many people have said, even you today, don't take it personally. So can you shed some light on how you've been able to do that? Just like what it is that, kept you strong in your core? and like determined to be like, no, I am going to make this work?
Well, one thing that I did not mention also in my presentation is that I did battle with postpartum depression as well, after my son was born. And so that part of my life in and of itself, it was kind of like, well, if I can make it through that, then I can do almost anything, you know? So I don't know, it's hard to describe, because you mentioned like the spiritual side of it. So I do feel like, being or being aware of self, oftentimes has allowed me to like constantly check myself, check how I'm showing up in the world, my drives, my goals, like everything with it. So I don't know. I don't know if I really have an answer for that, as wild as it sounds, but it's just kind of like this part of me that moves like actively with one lesson and like being mindful of that lesson, just constantly being in tune, because it's very easy to just float in the world, and just go about our days and make the dinner and go to the meetings and, all of the things that we need to do just to keep going. But it's also important to like stop, decompress, think, write, all of the things that we are told to do, but like actively doing it instead of just doing it because we're told to, right? Um, so yeah, I feel like that's kind of like how I get it going.
Beautiful. And I love this question, and I think it's a great one, and can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. Have you asked your son how he feels about your career as a photojournalist? Because I have a kid too at home, and I'm like, oh my God, she's 2, so it's still a little fuzzy, but I'm like, is she gonna love it? Is she gonna hate it? So I'm curious how your son feels about that.
I have asked him that, and I will say that I know that he tells people that I'm a photojournalist because I had a meeting recently, an IEP meeting, because he has an IEP, that's an individualized education plan. That's another thing with photography too, that IEP and understanding how that contract, that legally binding contract is, taught me how to read the lines, read all the lines, to understand what you are signing up for, what your needs are, all of the things. I completely forgot about that part. But jumping back, so we had the IP meeting, and before we even started the meeting, the teacher goes, "Oh, I heard you're a journalist." I was like, yeah. So he, let me know that Jordan talks about it often, and I'll share my clips with him and share photos with him, and he's like, "Oh, that's nice," and but again, he's 16, he's a sweetheart. My son is a sweetheart, so you know. At this moment, he's not, super ecstatic, jumping for joy and shouting from the rooftops. But I also think it plays into just being able to show him that this is what I love doing, and he's in the age now where he is figuring out, or we need to be figuring out what he wants to do with the rest of his life. So I'm using my photojournalism to tell him, look, see, you don't have to just do, X labor, not no shade to any industry, but it's like, but if you find something that you really, really love doing, then you can make a living from it. You can travel the world doing it, right? And that's not something that I had when I was a kid. Again, like I said in my presentation, my grandmother was like, go to school, graduate, get a job for the city, get that pension, and then that's it. So yeah, but in terms of him being one of my subjects, that's a different story. He's not a fan of it. Um, in his words, he says that I've become too serious. But I've told him that it's because, like, naturally when I get behind the camera, I go into like work mode, right? I become focused. I open my photo eye, as I like to say, and so now I need to I need to think, I need to process. And he does not like it. So I have a few photos of him, but I try not to push him. But again, he'll be like, another one, more. You said this was the last one already. Oh gosh, is it still the last one? All right, I'm not doing this anymore. And like he'll walk off like a diva on set or something like that. So, but again, it helps me to understand working with other people, right? Because if I tell a client that, okay, this is the last one, and then they're like, okay, and then it's not the last one, then they're gonna be like, wait, what? Wait, you just said we were done. What's happening? So setting expectations. I'm learning through him and applying it into my work.
That is too funny. I'm gonna go to the next question. Somebody asked, when you went out to the protest and photographed those very moving photos with your camera, what did you do with them and who did you pitch them to and how?
So I didn't pitch any of my protest photos. Most of those photos ended up on my Instagram. I don't think they're on there now. And they were on my website at one point, and again, they're not on there now. Well, like a few of them are. So for me, my desired path is not to become a protest action photographer. And I do know that when you create your portfolio and you pitch these things to editors, typically this is what they remember you for. These are the assignments that they contact you for. And so these are not things that I personally want to be hired to do, because I learned there was a protest for or a rally for I forget the young man's name, but he was in Louisiana, 14-year-old, and he was missing and they found him like in the cornfield or a sugarcane field or something like that. And um the family, they were looking for him and everything like that. And at the same time that story came out, my son was the exact same age. And so he was 14 years old. So being out there, out and about, covering that rally and hearing people constantly mention his name and his age and the parents and stuff, that was the rally that I just decided I can't do this anymore because I could not stop crying. Like, like my viewfinder on my camera was foggy because I kept like I just could not stop crying. So again, long story short, those photos are in my archive. But again, it's definitely not something that I bring out, more so because it's just not the type of work that I want to be hired for.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Going into another question, this is a really also important question. You mentioned how you were getting back into photojournalism, and for those in any other career, after being away in those early parenting years can be really daunting. It must feel like the industry has moved on without you. Do you have any tips on how to navigate jumping back in to your desired career when you were re-entering the world of photojournalism? What are some tips and tricks you found essential, like maybe social media promotion, reaching out to editors, etc.? What did you do and what did you find useful?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of my good friends, she demanded me to create a separate Instagram page for my photos. I have two Instagram pages, and I was just tossing everything up there. And she was just like, "No, you need to separate the two." So, being able to do that, creating a space for people to be able to see my work, and then following other photographers and connecting with people through engaging in their stories and the comments and reaching out in DMs and saying, hey, I love your work, and just putting yourself out there, increasing your visibility. And to the point that you mentioned, Polly, as far as like the industry having left me behind, which that's what it felt like. I started in print. My photography classes in undergrad were all darkroom analog. So I had to relearn digital when I got back into photojournalism. And you know, tapping into like knowing that I have to become a student all over again. While my son is a student and while he's doing his homework and he has, class meetings and what have you, I'm now having to pull from the things that I told him, make sure you pay attention, make sure you read all the things, make sure you ask questions, make sure you schedule meetings and follow-ups and all of those things with your teachers. And I found myself having to do the exact same thing, getting back into photography, really. And also understanding the power of networking. Back to what I was saying as far as the village, your village being able to hold you down. A lot of times I was able to be out and about, perfecting or fine-tuning the craft that I was good at, but then got very rusty with, because people were able to make sure my son was fed, make sure that he did his homework, make sure that he was in bed on time. And again, with him being older, I was able to text him from out and about. If I'm out on the streets doing just random street photography, giving him a quick call or so. So, for me, it juggles weirdly, but it works, if that makes sense. And I definitely don't take for granted as well that my son is older. And a lot of people who have smaller children don't have a lot of the luxuries that those of us with older kids do have, right? Because not everybody wants to watch a 2-year-old at the last minute, right? Not everybody's going to be available to keep your child for a few days if they're an infant, because they they're not obligated to, right? Let's be real. So it's tricky, trying to find that common ground that works for you and allows you to be able to follow your heart. I don't want to be one of those moms that's like in my rocking chair later on down the line, like, oh, back in my day, I wanted to be a photographer. And, I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my story. And I don't want that for my son's story too. So, so we got to make it work. We got to learn, like I said, constantly learning, constantly studying, constantly communicating, constantly reaching out. These are things I'm still doing to this day. Like, yeah, I'm always a student of life and photography. So yeah.
Dang. Student of life and photography. Love that. I also love the like old Zakiyyah rocking back and forth. Love that. Yeah, and I love what you said just now about, you don't want that story for your son either. And I know you said he's 16 and he's kind of like, oh, mom, not another one. But I'm sure seeing you like go for this dream head on and so determined is definitely teaching him too about what he can choose for his own life. And it's, yeah, fingers crossed, right? This is what we tell ourselves, right? Oh, they find us so inspiring. Yeah, whatever we need to tell ourselves, right? No, but truly, I think definitely, yeah, no, Zakiyyah.
It'll resonate.
Yeah.
It'll resonate, right?
So you just brought up, community and relying on one another. Do you have any tips that you would give a parent who maybe doesn't have a close knit community to rely on? I mean, I know that you have had that, but maybe in your peers or colleagues, maybe what you've seen others do, or just any tips on that?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of times when people hear, your village, your community, at least I think, like, my first thought is your immediate family members, right? So like your mom, your dad, your cousins, your sisters, your aunt, or what have you. But your village, your community is really anyone that you trust that can keep your child's best interests and their welfare, safe. So if it's a colleague, if it's a mentor, if it's, I don't know, a neighbor, just being able to identify those people that will have your back. And again, it doesn't have to be a whole large community. Sometimes that there's just that one person that's always there, and they deserve all the Christmas gifts, all the birthday gifts, right? As their thank you. But just, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it should be easier if you have more people you can call on. But sometimes that 10 group of people that's in your standby list might not be available that same day, like coincidentally. Mercury might be in retrograde and everybody got their world that they're juggling or whatever. I don't know. But so like don't be discouraged knowing that your personal network is pretty small. Hold tight to those people that always got you. That's like, yeah, like bring them over, bring that baby here. Like you go do what you need to do. We good. Bring a toy, bring the iPad, bring the game, or bring some snack. Oh, don't even worry about the snacks. We got some snacks. So like, just go do what you need to do. We good. So yeah.
I love the Mercury and retrograde. I'm like, basically from the time you have a child to just forever, just Mercury's in retrograde. Never gonna be not chaotic. But again, love all the tips and wisdom that you've been sharing with us here today, especially about how, parenting has helped you become, a better journalist or notice things about journalism that maybe you wouldn't have noticed before. And that really resonates with me too as a parent. I feel like, again, or maybe it's just what we tell ourselves, like, yeah. Yeah, we're better journalists because we're parents, of course. Yeah. So you mentioned, just to pivot a little bit, you mentioned in your presentation about asking for more money, which, is something that we all know, but aren't necessarily great at doing. I think we're always like, oh, okay, we'll work for free. Will work for recognition. Do not ever work for recognition, anyone listening. Do you have any tips on proposing your rate or any starting points or language to use or not use? How do you professionally ask for more money, as opposed to just like, give me more money, right? Like, how do you phrase that in a professional way?
So it's different. With photojournalism, as I mentioned, we know newsrooms, their rates are, set, right? So a lot of times with news, and again, I'm speaking more so about news because that's my industry. I know with commercial work or, whatever else, you can set your own rates. So when clients reach out to you, you can say, okay, here's, my rate for XYZ, and then you can negotiate accordingly. If negotiating is a thing, sometimes people accept it, some people, just don't. But again, specifically for news, oftentimes if you're new, right, if they reach out to you and it's your first assignment with this publication and they say, hey, we want to hire you for whatever story, our day rate is XYZ. And then they give you all the other fine details. It's okay to, thank them for sharing and reaching out, obviously. And then you can I would phrase it like, my standard day rate is, whatever the number is that you set. And then ask, does your newsroom you know, does your newsroom budget allow you to match my rate? You can ask them that way. Sometimes they'll say no. You might be lucky on a rare occasion that they might say yes. But again, closed mouths don't get fed. I love that saying because, the only time people are going to know that you want more or you need something is if you tell them, right? So just kind of, positioning it that way, just like, okay, hey, thank you for this information. My usual rates for an assignment like this is, say, $500, but they wanted to give you four. You can, like I said, just ask, does your newsroom budget allow you to match this? And if they say yes, great. If not, then that's fine too. I think too, when you're freelancing, your income comes from those types of assignments, right? So just that constant hustle and making sure that you are getting what you need out of, at the end of the day. So yeah.
No, definitely. I'm gonna ask another question along the same lines of just like closed mouths don't get fed. You mentioned the Missouri photo workshop. How did you find, out about that opportunity, and what advice can you give folks for those who are trying to find different initiatives, opportunities, or whatever to apply to if or to re-enter their field that they want to?
Yeah, so the photo workshop, Missouri Photo Workshop, I learned about it through a photojournalist that I follow on Instagram. He was an attendee, participant rather, last year, and I remember seeing him post about the photo project that he worked on, and just reading his caption of how he had to go into the community, driving around and found the people, and all of the steps that went into it, and then he mentioned the workshop. So um, with photojournalism, documentary photography, all those long form things. And then also for me as an engagement journalism major at my grad school, being able to tell in-depth stories about people and being able to connect with people like on a deeper, longer uh like duration is something that I want to continue to do. So like I said, when he mentioned that, it was just kind of like, oh wow, like this is what I need to be doing, right? So I went on their website, found out the information, and kind of kept up with their deadline and application process and everything like that. And full transparency, since we are we're sharing full transparency, I almost did not apply. Imposter syndrome almost had me not apply. And I literally submitted my application maybe like a day or two before the deadline. You have to have people do your letter of recommendation as well as your clips and everything like that. And of course, my portfolio. I had the photo work, but I had to reach out to the people and be like, "Hey, can you write this thing for me? I'm trying to get into whatever, but I'm dragging my feet, right? Dragging my feet, not telling anybody I want to apply." So imagine somebody comes to you and be like, "Hey, can you write this letter of recommendation that's due tomorrow?" So jumping back to your tribe, your village, your support system, having those people that really believe in what I want to be doing and how I want to continue to grow as a photojournalist. They were able, I mean, it wasn't a day. It might have been 2 days, but still. So again, just keeping up with their website and their Instagram specifically too, and being aware of when they were accepting applications or what have you. So I know for me, I often miss a lot of opportunities just because I'm not quite in the loop. So it's like the more in the loop you are, the better. The more people you follow on Instagram, as much as people have this love-hate relationship with social media, and I keep mentioning Instagram because I don't have Twitter and I barely use my Facebook, but being very active on social media can help you come across a lot of these opportunities. So as much as we love them and we hate them, just exposing yourself to these spaces, you can, be made aware of them in time, and don't be like me and wait until the last day to apply. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, definitely. And you're not the only one. I barely these days I'm on Facebook or Twitter, X, whatever. So I feel you. Okay, so this is a great question. You went into parenting, you went into journalism as a parent, but what have you learned from that experience that you might advise people going into parenthood as a journalist? Like, what's the advice that you would have wanted to know going into parenting? What advice would you have given yourself?
Run. No, I'm joking.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. It's a trap. No, but
The
seriously.
world's overpopulated anyways.
So you said advice for people that are journalists, but
Going into
want to
parenting.
become.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Like what? Yeah.
yeah, so I feel so one of the most important things would be to like drown out what a lot of people might want to tell you. For some reason, people just feel inclined to give you all the advice. Everyone becomes a scholar, everyone becomes a child specialist, and everyone will tell you, your career is going to suffer. Don't do it. You're not going to be able to, pursue whatever. It's a lot of negative talk when a person who seemingly is established in their career. And again, this is regardless of whatever industry you're in, right? But oftentimes people are like, you're doing so well. Why would you want to, become, throw a child in the mix? It's going to throw you off. And sometimes you'll have people that are supportive. And I said all that to say, truly sit with yourself, understand, and be very aware that it's not cheap to raise a kid. The way the economy is going, it seems like we're in this never-ending inflation. But your hustle is going to have to increase, right? Your the way that you advocate for yourself, you're going to have to like turn up the volume. You're going to have to like, if you're already like a business-minded person and you like to get things done and you like to be in order, well, when you toss a child into that mix, it's going to like really demand you to be mindful of like time management, yourself and others. Um, and just being like honest with yourself of when you can and can't do certain things. So when as photojournalists, we, especially if you don't have a child in your care, you're able to come and go as you please, right? So just being mindful that you won't have that flexibility to do that. And again, all of this applies to parenting as a whole, but again, specifically for this side of the industry. Um, and people, again, people are nicer now, though. I use the word nicer, meaning, when I had my son, I still had to cover my tattoos when I went on job interviews. So, the world has definitely changed. People are way more accepting and understanding, especially since the pandemic. I feel like people are a little bit more sympathetic to that split in your responsibilities in your day. It'll be challenging, but I feel like it'll be worthwhile. You'll learn more things about yourself as a person. Doing assignments, you might find new interests in photography. Maybe you might stop being a photojournalist and decide you want to photograph kittens because, you've seen kittens every day in your kids' books or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing out like random examples, but life as a parent definitely inspires you to see bigger, like you can see big as a person without a kid, but I don't know, man. It's just like you're kind of forced to see the world differently as a parent, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. So, it's just buckle up. So it'll be a fun ride.
Yeah, hold on tight. I love everything you're saying. It really resonates with me too. I mean, like I said, and as you know, I have a toddler at home. She'll be 2 next month. And I guess I was like, if I'm 10 years with my career, so I was like 8 years, so, I had been kind of doing it for a while, photojournalism for a while, and everything you said here resonates so much. Like, I feel like since having a kid, I am way better with my time, in a way. And it's like, now my time is like monetary, right? Like it really makes me think about money in a different way and where I'm putting my time and how much that, like how valuable is my time, both like metaphorically and literally. So it's really helped me to like say no a lot easier, which I was definitely not good at. And to ask for more, like you said. And just to honestly, I don't know, like I've covered, migration and women's issues for a very long time, but now when I'm like photographing a migrant mother, with her child, it like hits me in a different way than it did before. And I don't want to say that I wasn't compassionate before. Of course I was, but it's like you can literally put yourself now in people's shoes in a way that I wasn't able to before, which I think definitely adds to like empathy and compassion. That's also not to say that if you're not a parent or a caretaker that you're not empathetic or compassionate, but like you said, there's definitely like a before and an after from when you have a kid. And yeah, I think that just it's kind of like anything with life, right? Like you take the lessons that you can learn from that and apply it and for the good. So, and yeah, buckle up. So yeah, thank you. Everything you said has resonated so much. I think we have time for one more question. Someone asked, are there any organizations that prioritize single moms and perhaps, pay extra or provide work with daycare, or even organizations that support single moms working in the media industry? I mean, I'd love to hear what you say, Zakiyyah, but, there are some grants out there, like the Nat Geo Society grants that, have a line item for daycare. I know about that, but I'd love to hear what you have learned too, Zakiyyah.
Yeah, so like you just mentioned, it's with grants and other community-based organizations in your wherever you live. I personally have not utilized those services, so I'm still in the process of trying to gather that information though, because I'm also trying to build like this like a database for other people who might need certain information. And, if I were to have another kid one day, these are things that I might need. So, but I do know that like, don't don't beat me up, but quick Google search would be the best way to find that information, oftentimes to like local uh not WIC offices, but like your local like council member and other community organizations. I know we have a few here in Brooklyn where if you reach out to them, there's a it's called a family enrichment center near me, and they have a lot of resources as well. Your city, your county, a lot of times people they have money. So like you mentioned, the grant writing and reaching out. Um, a lot of times they want to pour into you that way. So artist grants, you can put that line item in your artist grant if you have a project that you want to do, right? Um, because you might need childcare expenses in order to travel to complete this project, or to if you are creating a mural or something in your neighborhood, then you would need these things to be able to do the job and complete the project successfully. So again, it's a lot of resources out there. It's hard to tap into specific ones, but definitely like a quick Google search on your city, your town, and artist grants or parenting grants specifically. Make sure you word it that way: parenting grants, or opportunities for parenting caregivers or whatever. Like those are keywords that is essential to putting into your search to narrow it down. Because if you say if you say caregiver, then it might default to like if you're taking care of an older parent, or just something like that. So just be mindful of the wording that you use when doing those searches. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also, one thing that you said that I think is really, really, really important, not only, this was a bit earlier and I remembered when you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to like, what is the word? Like you said something and I want to be like, yes, what Zakiyyah saying is so true. But this idea of like, you don't need to tell people why you can't do a job, right? Like an editor, and I think sometimes as parents we feel guilty because we're like, oh my God, I can't because I'm a parent. And it's like, first of all, you only feel that guilt. Second of all, let go of that guilt. And third of all, people don't need to know about your life. Like if an editor, writes to you, it's like, are you available for this assignment? And like, it's your day to watch your kid. You can just say, thanks so much for reaching out. Unfortunately, I'm not available today. Look forward to collaborating in the future, right? You don't have to tell them why. And sometimes like, not often, but, I'll just say I'm already booked for that day, which like, yeah, my daughter booked me for that day. I'm sorry, like, Este's got my time. So, remember, you don't have to tell everyone everything. And there might be a lot of reasons too that you have to take a break from the photojournalism world. Maybe you're on like a fellowship, maybe you're doing a long-term project, right? If the reason is parenting, it doesn't make that break any less like challenging or worthy than other types of breaks you might have to take, right? So I think that guilt that we feel and the desire to like want to explain that guilt, like let that go, let that go, let that go. So thank you for bringing
Yeah.
that up. Well, Zakiyyah.
Definitely, like over explaining is something that I find myself doing a lot, and it can drive you insane. So, because you're looking for a reason and a story, and you hope they believe you, and it's okay, and just a lot of that. But it's not necessary. And I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but and to the point that you said too, as far as taking a break from photojournalism or photography, that's okay too. You might feel like your peers and everyone else is like passing you by and getting the assignments, and everybody's portfolio is expanding and yours feels a little outdated, and that's okay. But it's like, what are you doing in the meantime? How are you growing in the meantime as a person? And is your kid in a better position now? My son is now on the honor roll, so it's like those little things that you have done in the meantime. I try not to get myself so beat down about like, okay, my portfolio is outdated. I need to be outside shooting. I need to reach out to editors. Like, I know how to do these things. Over this time, I've learned these skills and developed this confidence to do it. But, sometimes I got to step back. And then when the time is right, it's get back into it, just like how I got back into it during the pandemic. It's okay to restart. It's okay to readjust. It's okay to reset, especially if it's for your mental health, like I said, and the betterment of your child and your household.
So well said. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Zakiyyah, and breaking down what works for you when it comes to parenting and juggling photography, specifically photojournalism. And thank you everyone for the amazing questions. As always, it really helps, continue the conversation we're having here with our guests. So with that, we're going to take a 30-minute break before we get into our second half of day 2. We'll see you all back here to soak up some more knowledge with the incredible storyteller, Jeanette Jarman, who will explain how she transitioned into filmmaking and share her practice with you all. So again, we're going to take a 30-minute break, but before we do that, we want to thank our partner, Photo Wings, for making these classes free and accessible to everyone here.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everybody for listening to me ramble.
Thank you so much, Zakiyyah. It was amazing. And I love how like everything you said can just be applied to photojournalism in general, even if you're not a parent or caretaker. So no, it was golden. Thank you. And then Rebecca pasted our websites again will paste our websites again into the chat because as y'all know, these videos are recorded. Yeah. Everyone knows now. Cool. Thank you again, Zakiyyah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And like Polly said, we're going on a quick break. We'll be back by 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Eastern Standard New York, DC time, East Coast.